All right. Now, this formula can be taken much further because just as Full Spectrum Warrior allows you to have a whole career, a game like Rise of Nations, where you build a civilization, right? You build a civilization, have to build it from its earliest days all the way through its end time, through the nuclear age, against other people building up their civilizations. Here, the thing that you share with all the characters you're controlling, and now you're controlling buildings and armies and everything, is a whole history. They have civilization building skills, right? The buildings and the soldiers and the politicians all know how to build civilizations across time. You have to share that knowledge with them, get that knowledge. And by the end of the game, you have built a whole history. And you've built a different one than me. So now here we could sit by the fire and talk about history. A very important version of this is there are some games in which what you share with the character. How many people have played Morrowinds or Oblivion? Anybody? So these are very open-ended role-playing games. And in a game like this, I told you that with Alucard, you share basically just gaming expertise, jumping and stuff. And with the Full Spectrum Warrior Soldiers, you share military expertise. In a game like Morrowind, you get a character and you pick the skills for that character. And you pick what they're going to be good at, and then you live a life with that character. And what you really share with that character is the ability to develop in a certain way over time, to build a history, an identity, and to do things in the world. And games like Morrowinds, and this is from the original Morrowinds, the Elder Scrolls, are so open-ended that by the time you've played for 50 hours, and I've played for 50 hours, your character is developed as a completely different person than mine. It has a different identity, different sets of skills. So, for example, you might have developed your character in such a way that there are problems in the game that your character could solve by negotiating with people, right? Arguing with them and not fighting. But I developed my character in such a way that when I come to that part of the game, my character is an idiot at words. They could fight, but they can't solve the problem that way. And so here, at the end of the day, through Morrowinds, you and I have developed a whole life differently. We have lived a life and we've filled up that life. And you see, again, think of the potential of this, that you and I could build different lives and trajectories through a world, and then at the end of the day describe, well, the choices you made versus the choices I made about identity, about morals, about the values, about the way we solve problems. So when you get this far with video games, they begin to sound, even though they have no profound stories, no top-down stories like Henry James, they fit what Kenneth Burke said of good literature. The reason for teaching literature in school was that it was equipment for living. Right? Literature was supposed to be equipment for living in the sense that as you read different stories and different novels, it equipped you with vicarious experiences that let you think about the world and live your life in a strategic and reflective way. But you can see that games, by giving you the opportunity to have careers and histories and to develop lives through time in your own unique way and then compare and contrast with other people, it looks like it could be another modern form of equipment for living, ways to think through problems and problem spaces. Okay, now I want to finish with a little consideration of one game, because one thing has been kind of left out of this, and that is when these video games are giving you a life, giving you experiences, whether it's a career in Full Spectrum Warrior or building a history in Rise of Nations or building developing through time as a person in Morrowinds, they're not just giving you experiences alone. They're always defined as problem spaces. What games are about is the way that they give you a trajectory, the way that your trajectory is different than mine, the way that you can tell your own story, is the games was a set of problems. It's a set of problem-solving issues. And you solved the problems differently than I did. You solved them in a different order. So the problems in Rise of Nations of how to build your civilization, you did differently than mine. In Full Spectrum Warrior, you handled your campaign by calling in aircraft when I did it on the ground, right? So essentially, what allows the games to have a deep past, allows there to be a player's trajectory, is the experiences and lives they're giving you are defined around problem solving, which of course makes them in an interesting, unique form of popular culture, and this is why they're so profoundly good for learning, is basically they're problem solving spaces. The pleasure and that video games recruit is itself learning. Right? It's learning how to solve the set of problems, and doing so in such a way that by the end of the game, it was your story and your trajectory. So this is what the game I mentioned. This is SWAT 4, where you control a SWAT team. Much like in Full Spectrum Warrior. So you give orders to the SWAT team. They have a bunch of knowledge. They know how to be professionals. And essentially, your career as a SWAT member is going to be solving the sets of problems that SWAT people have to solve. The game will give you a bunch of goals, the type of problems SWAT people have to solve, and you have to solve them, and that's the pleasure in the game. And again, have to do it by the value system of the SWAT team. So you're going to have your unique career. You're going to share professional expertise. But one of the things that the game does to you, and that all the games that do this, that again Alucard doesn't have, is it gives you a set of tools with which to solve the problems. Right? The game is a problem-solving space. So I'm going to give this as an example of one of the tools. The game is a problem-solving space, and it's through solving the problems that you have a career. It's through solving the problems that you do performance before competence, and that you pick up the value system skills and ways of looking at the world as a SWAT team member. But unlike a lot of learning in school, all of that learning and problem-solving is scaffolded by tools that encapsulate for you how to gain that knowledge and what that identity is. So this, I don't know, the lights here aren't really good. One of the things that you have to abide by in the value system of being a SWAT team member is you've got to get in and out of rooms that may or may not have dangerous people in them. And you have to do it safely. You cannot lose any SWAT team member. You can't allow any civilian to get killed or hurt. And you can't even shoot a bad guy unless he's shooting at you. So if you talk about looking at the world differently, this game gives you a totally paranoid sense of looking at the world, because you're in these spaces and you really have a great opportunity of being killed, but you can't really do a lot of violence because you've got to behave by this code, and you have to keep everybody safe. And one of the troubles is you immediately realize if I'm going into a room and the door is closed, how do I know? I've got this value system, I've got the goal, I've got the problem. If I've got to get into that room, nobody can get hurt, I can't get killed, there's very likely to be somebody in that room with a gun, I can't run in Rambo style and shoot him because I've got to warn him I'm a policeman, and unfortunately I can't see through the wall. Right? So there is a little tool that you're given that the SWAT people have as part of the professional practice, is this little thing in a mirror, and you slide it under the door, and the mirror shows you what's on the other side of the door, and you you know if there, what you do is that team member, you order the team member to do that, and then he reports, and he'll say something like, there's 2 people behind this door. Over on the right there's a guy with a gun, and on the left there's somebody there, he doesn't have a gun. Then, now you know what you're going to face. Now you have to choose how to enter that room and how to handle that situation. So what games characteristically do is essentially they create a problem. They are a set of experiences defined around problem solving, but where they give you the set of tools to solve those problems, and where the tools encapsulate a good bit of the knowledge and value system that you're trying to learn, right? And again, so if one was going to build, as we do with urban planning and other games, if you're building this sort of game, it's crucial that you create it as a problem-solving space, but that people are given tools that encapsulate the knowledge and skills they have to have and allow them to do it, especially if you're going to do this performance before competence idea. All right, and then I've already pointed out that in games like SWAT 4, one of the tools, one of the things that you use most importantly are the intelligence that's in the artificial characters, or when you're playing in multiplayer, the intelligence that's in other people. So that the type of learning that you do, and in fact it isn't learning, it's also the pleasure of playing the game, is this collaborative problem solving between you and these artificial characters or you and real people. Right? And it's a collaboration really between you and the smart tools you got, like that mirror, and these other people. And then how you do that, and how the story, in a way what I'm saying is the game, that trajectory, that story you get to tell in a game like this really is just the story of your learning. It's a story of how you learned to solve those problems and how you did it, and the feeling of mastery you have when you have a career at the end to say, look at how I went through all these problems. I remember in the beginning how every room I walked into, I got my head shot off. And now, boy, I could get in that room and save 50 people and get out of there and never take a wink, right? And I remember where I learned that, and I remember the mistake I made there. And you have a different story, right, to tell.